Hello and welcome back to another episode of our Mega-lo-Mania in Unreal Engine. So last time, Thursday was the last stream I think. On Thursday we got the main menu working for a single player scenario where all of the options worked and you could pretty much go into a game. Unfortunately I found that the way that I'd set that all up just wasn't going to work with the multiplayer scenarios, and while the menu is somewhat of a kind of, not a prototype I suppose, but just a first draft of how it's all going to be put together, I still wanted the ability for you kind of to go into it multiplayer. And I found that because everything worked through the widgets themselves couldn't replicate the data between the client and the servers. It kind of makes a lot of sense once I read up on it, but the bottom line was that the widgets don't exist on the server, so you can't replicate the data like you can in other places. Despite the fact that the variables seem to have the option to, it just doesn't seem to work. Now that meant that I had to kind of apply the changes to the data, to the variables, using a different blueprint. Either the player controller or the game instance or the game mode or various things like that would work. And that meant quite a few changes and moving around. What I've managed to do so far is get the island to work. So we still have the scenario where the menu is available for both players, and the second player that's not the host is unable to change the options. But so for example, if we change the opponents, obviously that's not reflected on the other player, which it should be. But I have made it so that the island is reflected on the other player. So the first player, the host, can select the island. I haven't fixed up character selection, so that's still a problem. And that's basically where I am. So now I've got the working version of the island. It should be fairly straightforward to get the rest of the bits working. To get the island to work, I have created a new game state and game mode and player controller. So obviously the game mode's really just there to apply the new player controller and game state. And the game state holds the kind of level game related options that aren't tied to a particular player. So in this case, the islands and the opponents. And the player controller holds the character that the player has selected and the start location. One complication with the character was that the variable of just playing character is already in use by the base class of the player controller, so can't have that. So I had to settle for selected character instead. Not quite so good, but that's the way it is. So the variables are now, as I say, split between these two blueprints. Inside the options menu, the options widget, we have generally the same code so far. I have created a couple more functions to separate things off. So the function, we've got a function called populate island options that populates the island selection box. So we come into the constructor and we populate the island selection box. We have this isHost variable that's passed in when the UI is created. The UI is still created at the level within the level blueprint. So if we open that up, we can see we're creating the options here and we're passing in this it has authority into there, and the has authority obviously working on the level blueprint to tell us whether we are or are not effectively the host or the main player. That does mean though that if we run as a dedicated server, nobody can change anything and nothing works. So I haven't addressed that part yet. Where were we? So if we are the host, we set the selected option on the island combo box, and we set it to be whatever the populate island options deems to be the default option. So that one basically returns the first island as the default. And we set that on the selection box, and then we do basically as we have done with the opponents, because I haven't updated that yet. If we are not the host, we just disable the island combo box and options opponents combo box. Now the main thing is when this selection box is changed, either by this code or by the user, we drop down to this event here. This event basically says that yeah, I think I didn't fill that in for a reason, so I'll get back to why that's there and why it's not actually doing anything at the moment. But for the host, effectively, they would set the island variable inside the options, and then they would render the map. And again, that's just a function, sorry, that's just the event. We'll get back to that in a minute. And then we stop because I haven't, again, completed everything. Rendering the map's pretty much as it was, but we set the selected island. Sorry, yeah, I remember that. We render the map widget, and that's just doing what we've done before. We're rendering that map. We bind to the sector selected event, so we can change the character, castle, or the location, start location, and then we add it to the widget. Add the minimap to the widget. Now, we've got the selected island in this options. This is kind of the UI's reference to which island has been selected. But the detail I missed from here was that we're actually setting the island on the game state. Now the game state's actually only available on the host, so we do need the check. Now I don't think it's actually causing any problems. Let's just find out. If I select that, yeah, it doesn't seem to actually cause any problems, so perhaps perhaps it doesn't go in there for the client, I guess. Let's find out. I would have thought that it would have said that it can't set things on the game state. Game state is only available for the server, I believe. Unless I'm misremembering which one that is. Yeah, it exists on both the client. Yeah, so the game state would be being set on the client, even though the client wouldn't actually use the game state. Potentially wouldn't use the game state, I suppose. Yeah, okay, so that's as I thought. So just simply by checking the host value, we just avoid setting it on the game state, because the game state has the values as replicated anyway. So there's no reason to set them on all of the different clients. So as the host sets that, all the client does when that option is changed is render the map. Now for the client, the option is changed in the tick. So we have a tick here that basically is checking whether the game state's island is the same as, or in this case different to, the selected island on this widget. If it is different, then we're rendering the map and selecting the option. We actually don't need to render the map here, do we? Because yeah, so there's still a bit of confusion there, because selecting the option is going to render the map anyway. I don't know what it's going to render it to with the game state. Oh, it must. Yeah, so because we know the value comes from the game state, we don't need to render the map there, which makes that a bit cleaner. We've got branch here, the branch is off at the moment, so we'll take them, keep them nearby. So when the event tick basically says if the current options island, the selected island within the options widget is different to the game state, then we just update it by selecting the right one. That should still work. Yep. And that utilizes the combo selection box event and the render map event to get that updated. So the general principle for the character is going to work the same. We're going to work on the opponents first, because the opponents one's going to be much simpler, because the opponents one again is just a host-based thing. So currently we define the opponents to default to 1 within this class. So we'll do that again here. So because the game state is going to be the default values now, or at least as much as is required. So I suppose what we could do, just for argument's sake, wondering why the options is blank, because it should be populated with that. Doesn't matter really. So another thought that I had was, I'm selecting the combo box here, but the game state, therefore the combo box is going to say one thing and the game state is going to say something else, until that whole tick update process has been done. So it actually would make more sense to set on the game state the selected island, just put that up here to the default, and then actually just skip this part for the time being. And I think the end result of that should be the same. Yep, so far so good. And what we can do then is jump in here and we can pick a different island as our default. And yeah, we've selected that. So basically the reason that works simply because by changing what the game state says, the tick comes along and says, okay, well the selected island for the options is not the same as the selected island for the game state, so we should update it, and then we do. And leaving it to that same process just means that we've got less branches within the code, and we're going to do that for the opponents as well. So actually we don't need to do it for the opponents because they're going to be set by default anyway. So really we populate the island options. We have to populate that for all players. If we're the host, we set the island to whichever default option we've already predefined, which is generally always going to be the first. Let's dig that back out again. Just make sure I put it back to the first. That one. If we're not the host, we just disable those option boxes. So now we know the opponents is going to be set to something once we've tied up the same set of branches here with the event tick. So I put the sequence in place so that we can do many at once, because there's effectively 4 things that we need to set during the tick. We have to do that is host check. Oh no, not that one. We have to do the comparison here. So we'll do the same, not equals comparison. We'll put them the same way round as we've had them before. Push that down because we'll need to use that. Set selected option. So we need to set the selected option for the opponent's combo box instead. In that scenario. So now we should be able to, okay, so we haven't handled the change properly. So the change is done here. Currently we're setting it on the widget itself, so obviously we want to set it on the game state instead. So this get skirmish setup game state is just a quick function I put together to do the casting internally. So nothing special in there. So from that we want to set the opponents. Too much going on down here. And that's very much like what we do for the island. So we do need this host check in there. Almost forgot that. It's almost superfluous because the clients can't actually set it anyway, but because we call the set selected option part, the clients do call this, and then they would set it on their own instance of the game state, which we don't want to do. So that should be that. Now we should get some. Nope. So the defaults is 1. So we just change this one to selected opponents again, just so we've got that kind of clarity on which one we're changing when. Okay, so that looks about right. When we come into here, we should branch. So if we change the opponents on the client, we shouldn't actually do anything. It's about right with what it looks like here. Maybe I took the code away that populated that. It should be populated already with this code. 1, 2, 3. So maybe we're just setting it to the wrong thing. Let's take that out. Still don't have any values for it. Maybe that one then. See if we can see what it's trying to set it to. It's trying to set it to 1, which is the right value. Should still work. Yeah, so it's saying that the index is 0, but that actually is correct. The index is 0 for number 1. If we just change that to 2. I'm saying the index is 1 now, which is fine. So that part of it's actually working. So why is my options going away? Must be something else messing with them. So there is the fact that we're not actually setting, yes, stop that in a minute. What we did do down here for the island was that we, within the render map, we actually set what the selected island is. Not doing that for the opponents yet, so when the opponents is selected, if we are the host, we set options on the game state. We also have to set it within the widget. I think actually though, if we do it down here, it's going to get a bit messy. Kind of want to do it here. Might make sense to then do the island selection in the same place. So if we set it on the widget first, we know that we're not going to kind of repeat this process. Then we update the combo box. And we'll do the same process for this one. I think that's probably better. Hopefully it will resolve the issue. There we go. Okay, so down here. We don't need that argument anymore. Then I think we'd actually want to do that after setting the option. It doesn't change anything visually, which is good, but that kind of tries to keep things all concise. The tick basically says if the game state information and the current widget information is not the same, then set it on the widget, update the combo box, and do whatever's meant to be done after that. It does mean that obviously the combo box selection doesn't actually do anything, but that this kind of suits more the needs of the multiplayer aspect of it, whereas handling things on the actual click events doesn't work if the combo boxes are updated automatically through the event, through the data replication. So there's an element of it making sense in that case to do things consistently. And the render map widget, I think, is fine. It's unaffected. Okay, so that does mean that we have both the island selection working still and the opponent selection working. One thing that we do need to do is modify the available opponents for a particular level, but that's something we didn't have before, so don't know where we'd fit that in. So the next part of it is actual player selection or character selection. Now, one thing that would be nice really would be that in multiplayer we could in theory have any amount of players rather than just the 4. It would be good to maybe have on a bigger island maybe have 8 players or even more than that potentially, depending on the map. So rather than them picking a colour in this sense, maybe the colour picker, it should just be more of a colour picker. But in a single player skirmish you would want to pick your character, and there still needs to be some elements of when that character's shown that would need to be addressed for those scenarios. So I'm going to keep it again kind of limited to the 4 players for the time being, but bearing in mind that we might want to change it later. So we still have the click events for the character selection. They are currently calling the event for on character change, so that works very much like as if it was a combo box then. So the general process has to be the same. We want to set the character on the player controller instead of the gadget, the widget itself. We are going to need function for this, for get skirmish player controller, so we don't have to do that casting. Return value should be a player controller. So now we'll use our function to get the, oh, we need to make it pure. So again, too much going on down here. So at the moment the order of the events is kind of aligned with the order of the widgets. So when we get the player controller, we want to set the selected character. Set. On the player controller. Now we do have to do other things when the character changes. We'll address those perhaps in a bit. First we want to reflect that correctly. Now because we're going to have multiple players, we can't rely on our current kind of selection of just making them see-through, effectively what we did, because we won't know who's picked who. So one thing that I think we can do see if we can find some simple box or another. A border. I think that border should be fine. And we want to render that as a box. Background, and that's the actual content. Although we can actually render that as a box, even though it should be a border. Bit that I was looking for is if you look at an image, we can draw as a box. Doesn't seem to change anything, but a border. We don't have that here. Appearance brush. There we go. Draw as box border. Margin doesn't do what we need. Oh, does the scale. Trying to go for some actual border. I mean, we can see that there's a border there, but I don't seem to have any colour there. don't know what's happened to it now. It's gone all weird and skinny. Can't see what I've changed that's caused it to now effectively not show both the green and the red. That one definitely needs to be an image. See how far back I can go. Okay, so the border doesn't seem to do what I want it to do, or at least doesn't work very well. I don't know why. When it says a 3x3 border, we don't see anything. Unless you're really meant to have seems a bit over the top to do it this way around, but so that would be the top row, row 1, row 1, oh, no, row 0, that would be column 1, column 2, column, no, column 0, column 1, yep, and that should be row 0, row 1, row 1. So just basically putting these all in the grid. So the borders, oh, no, not row span, column span, effectively go around it. That one, 2, column span 3. Okay, so draw as a border. Having them all drawn as borders actually just seems to make them invisible, so that doesn't do what I wanted to do anyway. Another option would be probably that might make it a little bit easier. Let's get rid of that. So we've got a border, and the image in the end. So the border at the top needs a padding of 3. Border in the middle needs a content and color of black. Oh, no, not content. Brush color of black. There's a box. And needs to be rendered as a box. Okay, so that kind of gives the result that we want. Basic principle is that we want to highlight the selected character with an appropriate color for who it is. So we're making this particular row quite big. So the next thing we want is a bit of text. Okay, let's put the text under that. Okay, that will work. My other characters are a bit overblown, but we need to put them into the same container. Now we could just duplicate all that across the board, but that means we've got the name to duplicate and all that kind of stuff. So we will create quickly another widget, and we'll call this a selected character widget, and we'll just recreate that all in here instead. That one. And that way I won't have to duplicate all the logic to handle it. So in here we want a vertical box is where we start. So we'll make the canvas the vertical box. Two borders, one image, and a text. first box should be like that. Image. We will pass in which character it needs to be, but we'll just select one for now. So that border needs to be black. The other one can be white to start with again. Text centered. 8 and regular. It should be fine. So the first border, which is effectively our kind of background, currently the white border, that one needs to be a variable. We're just going to call it border. Selection highlight. It will be player name, and this will be character image. So we need a new variable for the sprite. It's going to be passed in when this is created. Oops. Maybe we should make it a brush actually, but how big do we want our sprites? So by default they're about 50 by 55, I guess. We'll go for that. Though I think perhaps some of them are different sizes, aren't they? Yeah, he's 38 by 54. Yeah, so there might be different sizes because I've got some additional bits and pieces around them, but so I might just quickly tidy up those images and see if they are the same size. So having them different sizes means I have to pass the brush in. So 2 pixels too wide. So 53. Oh, no. 48. Yeah, so he's a completely different size. 35x opposed to 48. It's quite a lot smaller. One moment. I'm back. So yeah, just sorting out the characters, but they are different sizes. Because of the way this one lines up, the green one's particular, specifically, I could make him the same width, and then therefore they all could be the same width, but he would be off center. So it's not going to make any sense. Just to make this one a little bit smaller. So for some reason the red player is 10 pixels wider than the rest. Oh well. So it would therefore mean that I would have to pass in this one. Pass in the brush instead of the sprite. Doesn't really matter if it's valid or not, it's always something, even if that something is to display nothing. Okay, and then over on our options, yeah, let's put that back. We can then replace, actually what we need to do. Yeah, so we need to know the name of the player. We also need to know when it's clicked on. Guess we'll have the click at the top level anyway. So otherwise we'll just restrict where the player can click on it. Mouse button down. Work on that in a moment. So we'll replace our yellow character for now. Actually, we won't get rid of him completely, just in case this doesn't work or doesn't work out well. User created. We call it the selected character. Not really where we wanted him. There. So at the moment, because the image doesn't have anything in it, it's showing up a bit awkwardly. So we actually need to create them dynamically. Here. Do all the host stuff afterwards. So this vertical box, nope, this horizontal box. We need to expose it as a variable, and we'll have that as character container. Okay, so passing in 0, 0 actually seemed to work. Okay, 0, 0 seems to default to the size of the character, so what we can do then is actually just pass in the sprite here again, because that's much easier than having to make a brush. This as an array of sprites. Going to improve this in a moment. Select a character widget. Sprite should be still exposed. There we go. So we should have the same result now. Yep. So we've still got the third player. Now by default we want the text box to have no text in it. We do want it to have some height, because if it doesn't have any height, then it's going to make it look a bit jolty when it's when it actually gets populated. So we'll give it some height by saying that the no player and just not make it visible. Now with that we need to take those, comes into a function, call that function create widgets. Now another thing that I realise is that we're going to need the widget to tell us who the character is, because we can bind to an event from it. Click. Yep, good. So I thought that was going to be the case. So we can create an event called on selected character, or on selected, I think actually, though it is on the mouse button down event, so that's fine. We can call that, but we need to know what the character is so that we've got something to pass out of here, so that the parent gadget, parent widget can handle it too. So we're going to have a name to pass out, which means we're also going to have a name passed in at creation time. Get that to update. which means we need to know who's who. So we set up the sprites. And then instead of just doing one, we're just gonna iterate over them. So we know our element is a sprite and our key is the name. And we also need to bind to the appropriate event. And for that we have to use a function, and we should get onChange character, I think. If we jump back to the main graph, onChange character, yes, gives us a character name. So it's kind of the end result is going to be the same event that we had before. But just triggered in a slightly different way. So now if we run this, we should end up with characters in a box. All the boxes are looking slightly different sizes. So we need to go to the selected character. Image needs to be whatever the image of the red character is, 50 by 55. Hopefully that sorts them out. Nope. So I think it's the border that we need to use. We need to put it in a size box instead. I mean, perhaps the size box is all we need and not the border. Brush color black. No, we need the size. We need the border, image in the border, border in the size box in the first box. So now we can say that the minimum desired height and width, minimum of width width is 50 and height is 55. And that should mean that they all almost look the same, and then we just need to make the character image non-stretched. They're not quite the same size still. Because this red character is still not quite the same. How big is she? 48 by 55. Maybe 40. So yeah, maybe it's because I'm saying the size box. We just make them all even. I guess that works. But maybe they don't need to be quite that big. But we can jump back over here. Get rid of all the old ones. So data selected character we don't need. Okay, so they're definitely too big. Need to make them thinner. I think we should be able to go for width wise 55, 60. Still too big. It looks like the blue and the yellow images. I'm sure I thought I redid them, but they clearly haven't saved. Or at least they haven't updated yet. Seem to have lost the yellow one. It's annoying. Don't know what I did to make it full screen, but it means I have to put it back in place. Okay, let's see if that makes them look right now. Still hasn't updated them, but we'll worry about that another time. They're all there. Odd amount of margin between each one. Seems to have a big gap between those two. But the principle is we've got that they've got text underneath, so now once we click on them, we should be able to put the player's name under them. But then that will need to be replicated, and seems to just go on and on and on. This particular selection, I'm not sure, because another issue that I have here is that, thinking about it now, it probably isn't the way that I need to go anyway. With the end result, we need to be more flexible with the characters and the colours if we were to support more than 4 players. So by having these 4 selections, it works kind of well in a single player environment, but from dynamically allowing multiple players, we need more flexibility with the characters. So I'm just not pleased with that. Okay, so what do we get when we start? This player doesn't get anything. When we start the game, let's work on that. Island. So we have a UI within our workplace user interface here to display the options. Which one was that? Display game options. Currently that's dragging all the options from the world instance. Now I think because we've changed levels, that's where it's going to be. Or that's where it has to be. But we don't apply that information correctly, and we also don't apply it for multiple players. So we want to go back to New World Instance. Now we're only ever going to have one island. Does that make sense? I don't know if we want this information replicated or not, but we will have multiple characters and multiple start locations, and they will come from multiple player controllers. Oops. So I think if we go into the display game options and game state, so in this case we don't have that macro to merge it, so we'll have to do it by hand. Just cast it to state. Island. Put that in there. So now I think if I understand this correctly, despite what we pick here, I would not have expected it to show up. That would mean that the game's state is not recreated. See if that's true. Yeah, so the game state doesn't seem to be destroyed when we transition over. Let's see if that's true for the player controller. Oops. Just want to worry about single player again. Yeah, so there's nothing from either of the player controller or the game state, so they don't seem to be destroyed in a kind of seamless transfer. But seamless transfer is not really what we want here, because we can't have different states and player controllers and etc. for a seamless transfer. So one aspect, I wanted to try and fix up the menu for multiplayer, but I think I have to go back and give some thought to how in multiplayer I'll be able to handle things like more players, kind of above the 4 limit, and how they would work, and whether the multiplayer kind of lobby skirmishy type options will be the same as the single player skirmish options, and then equally, if so, how that all ties together. But one thing I did want to also address was, at the moment I've bundled in kind of a persistent level, this top level, what I've called New World, with individual levels for the effective game and menu. And I don't believe that that's the structure that's going to work well, because you can't have a different game state, you can't have a different player controller, and all those kind of things are all tied to the kind of persistent level area, which means the player controller and the game state and all those kind of things again all relate to both the menu and the gameplay at the same time. And it would be much cleaner if the gameplay elements, basically all the blueprints and all the code related to the gameplay, was separate from all the code and stuff related to the menu. So to achieve that, what I already had and have had a few times in fact is games for actually playing the game. So we have this game, we have the island game effectively, and the sector test. They're all kind of related to when you're actually in the game and you're playing on an island. The rest of it is actually going to be kind of more menu based, except for the island selection kind of part, which is kind of what I was starting or thought I was going to be doing here, or intended to do in a manner of fashion, but actually verged off to do more of a skirmishy style thing. But it also doesn't potentially make sense to have the main menu and all the sub menus therein part of a actual different level instances, because generally we're not going to need to store a great deal or do a great deal in the levels for the main menu and the other areas. But we will need to do the perhaps have separate section for the kind of startup cinematic or the credits part, and those things may be better as separate levels to keep them in self-contained. But therefore, what we want to do is actually start the game on what will be the main menu. So let's have a look what this one is. Yeah, so all we did was get a button. Okay, so there wasn't a great deal with the main menu here. So there's a main menu game mode, so that's going to go with the actual menu part of it, and a menu player controller, and we may have menu other stuff as well, like menu game state. We're actually going to start with we've actually got one here. Let's see what's in here so we can see if we can edit this one. I don't think there's a great deal that is in here. It's basically just a button and here we have that button. Okay, so that's fine. So we're just going to take this main menu and actually make it into the main menu that we intend to have. Now, the starting point of this is really going to be somewhat similar to kind of a main menu you would find in most other games. We want to have a sprite, and we're going to take the it's not on that one. Textures. So this one. Find the right one. Maybe we don't have that text loaded. It's finding the right image that I want to use. I don't think I have it actually available. Yep, okay, don't have it. We'll ignore that for now then. We'll just go back to where we were. So we started with a horizontal box before to kind of get that center alignment. So we need that. And then we'll want a vertical box to actually put everything in. We'll start off with the title. So the horizontal box, vertical box needs to be pushed over. Yeah, so we use spaces, that's what we had before. Spacer to start and a spacer to end. Two spaces should be filled. Take the horizontal box, take the whole screen. So we will add a bit of a spacer to the top of the vertical box. We can fill that up as needed once we've done. And we'll add a space to the bottom of the vertical box as well. So what we can do with this one is fill on both of those, and we've got it centered, but we want it slightly higher than it is lower, so we can put this one down to 0.8, 0.6. And we can tweak those numbers once we've filled in more content. So that's really just our title. Don't know why everything's bolded. We'll have a spacer between the title and the first option. And we want some buttons. So we're going to basically just have the key buttons that you would expect to have within a game. So we've got buttons, we need the text. So this one will be continue. This one is new game. So actually we're going to say this one is going to be campaign. Right spelling for that. And this one will be skirmish. And this one will be quick. So one thing that we could do with these images is we actually have kind of button borders here, although they're normally what the game uses to put messages in, so maybe they wouldn't work well as buttons. I'll have to come up with a nicer style. So continue would obviously continue the game that you may have been playing before. So it will load in the most recent save. Didn't actually want to change that. Let's change it back. I want the button to be continue. This button will be campaign. So this will be maybe new game instead. Oops. One thing we've missed from there is saving and loading. So we'll add saving and loading necessarily, but it's just load game. One is we need to add all the button clicks for these. I think there's a slight difference between clicked and pressed, so I'll work on pressed is when it goes down, and clicked is when after you've released. So I actually want the pressed one. Sorry, the clicked one. So we'll just run those through. So the quick game one will quit the game. That one, dead easy. Almost unnecessary at the moment, but we've got it in there anyway. Continue will only be valid if there's actually a game to continue from, so we'll have to add the logic in to determine whether that's true or not and handle it. For the time being then, we want it to be disabled. So that's what our menu looks like. I'm going to have to change all the text to be non-bolded. It's a bit better. It's nice that it just fits all the options we needed. So one thing that we did add for our level here was when we showed the UI, we did some changes to everything here, so we can take those and put them into our main menu level as well. So there's no point doing any of that or that. In this level, all we want to do is show that UI with the appropriate information. So now we've showed the UI, and we've used the same logic. We want, so the skirmish game is going to actually link up to the skirmish game we did before, but rather than having that as a different level and showing a different UI, what we actually want is just to change the UI from one to another. So within our menu, we're currently just showing it on the begin play. We want more than one menu to show. So we can use, I think custom events would be the easiest way to do this. So we'll have display main menu. So I have to make sure we remove all the widgets from the viewport before we display the new ones. And then when we start, we're obviously going to display the main menu. Let's close everything else. And open the main menu. So when we load a game, we need to show the appropriate main menu. That is done at this level. Let's see what we can do here. So to get those events down to the level blueprint which is going to manage them, we will need some event dispatchers. I think actually we can just have one rather than many. Actually two. Yeah, I think that works. When we click continue, we want to load a game. We're going to call it last played. Played. Obviously don't know exactly what's going to happen there, but the principle is that we don't change a menu, we just go straight into loading a game. Now again, to make sure that we don't get confused about which menu we're on or which menu we're showing or need to show next, going to use a enumeration to hold all of the menus. So we have the main menu, we'll have the load game menu. Oh. We will have the skirmish menu. Somewhat a bit pointless ending all these in menu since they are all menus. And one will be the campaign. Is that all the ones we got? Yep. So change menu needs a write a menu enum that we will set to the load game menu. And just apply that to each of our buttons. Then in our main menu, our main level, it creates the main menu, it adds it to the viewport, but it will also bind to the change menu. So we do need to do this bit over here instead. We'll do it afterwards. So that just sets up the player controller so that it's kind of UI focused, and then displays the widget. So we don't need to do that on every menu change. Change menu, which takes a menu enum, you need to switch on the menu, and now we take that and put it in here. You have to do it as a function, otherwise we'll have lots of lots of custom events for each of the bindings, and we want to reuse them. So we have to do it like this. So in over here, we, instead of calling display main menu, we'll just call our function with the appropriate menu. So end result should be the same. Switch those two around. Now in theory we should check that we're not on the same one, but I don't think there'll be any button to go back to the same one anyway, so that shouldn't be a problem. So now we want our load game menu. So the load game menu is not going to have all of the same buttons, but we will need a back button. Which we'll call cancel. Obviously we won't have a skirmish, campaign, load or save. We will need a scroll box in there, and that's where all of our load game options will be once we're done. Just run wonder if we need, so we made them variables. Yeah, so let's just tie that one up first. So when we load game, we want to create widget. Load game menu. Yeah, so we probably want a base class widget to do that rather than tying it all up every time. Oops. Call it in this case on change menu. And we'll also have the onload game event in this case. Switch them around. No, can't switch them around. So obviously once we have the load, the games, save games, we'd actually call the onload game event with our name, and then it would load it the same as it would load the continue game. Not cool. So just tie up these events wherever it was in the level. Yeah, there we go. Load game here, load game there. So now we should be able to go into the load menu and should have been able to go back. Change menu back. Okay, so we are saying the main menu. That's not what we wanted to do. Load game and cancel. So, cancel button doesn't seem to be taking us back. So yeah, I'm not sure why my back button, my cancel button's not working. So maybe it does need to be available then. Yeah, there we go. Forgot I changed that. I was going to look into it, but I didn't get around to it. Okay, so that works. Um, so the campaign's basically just going to go into the island selection part of it, kind of, I think. Well, actually, the only question for a campaign is what player the character player is going to be. So, yeah, let's put that one together. So we'll add that. Menu just so it's similar to everything else. So this one's actually going to look like the actual game's new campaign type character selection. Basic layout's going to be the same thing, so that we get some spacing in there. So once it loads, that's what we're aiming for. So first box, some text, that'll be player select. Now awkwardly her head is actually above the player select, so it's not a perfect grid. So make that full screen. So for that we'll need 3 vertical boxes. In the left hand and the right hand we need the 2 images for the players. That will be red and green and yellow and blue. Red and green and yellow and blue. So we'll space them out in a moment. Player select. We have a bordered name box, so we can actually make the bordered name box similar to what we had before, just slightly less to it. So the border, in this case, we can actually the colour, so we're not going to have that or the lighting effect to start with. We'll just go for a solid colour. Did it in the wrong one again. It's the brush colour that we want. And then the text should be the same colour. Doesn't look like there's a background colour. So we do need another border in there to give it a background. And that border needs to have black. So this one needs to have padding. bring that down all the way down to 8. Need to space that out a bit. Fill each side. So we don't want any padding on the text, I don't think. Or at least not so much, maybe 1. There we go. All their names in. So the borders again are the same size as each one, so we will need that size box. Actually, forgot about that one. Don't know where I put the size box now. For now. So it's going to be this color instead. So again, we'll just make the text and the border the same colors to keep it simple. But later on we need to apply a bit more kind of texture and effect to that to make it match more what the original looks like. But we'll start simple. Probably going to be better to keep things together. So we'll put that in a vertical box and have this text underneath it. Sure where that last vertical box was dropped. it's 3 lines. Copying the text so that we get the same color. So if it's going to be too big, we need to show it first. So back into our level. So we currently don't have a way to get back from the campaign screen. I have to add something in. What I could do is we use the same event we have had before and change menu. The new variable of menu and our menu enum. And then they press escape, we go back to the main menu. There's ways to keep moving around, otherwise I'll just forget. Obviously escape's not a good one, because escapes are straight out. Maybe backspace. Doesn't seem to work. Don't even know if we're capturing the button in this case. Doesn't look like it. Okay, so figure that out another time. If it doesn't work, might as well leave it as the key we want. It actually looks like all the text fits, surprisingly. Hi there, Selvesti. I haven't really done a lot of stuff with the physics and effective shooting of stuff. I'm fairly new to the engine and I'm working more on somewhat of a 2D based game without any kind of collision physics, so I wouldn't even know where to start to help you with that problem. I'm sure. I think there's the engine comes with quite a few little examples of how to do kind of first-person shooter games. So hopefully one of those might be able to tell you why your shot's not working, but I can't. Sorry. No problem. Yeah. So all the text fits, which is nice. I thought it was going to be too big, but it seems to fit somehow just about right. Just need our characters to line up with the text for them. So just going to drop in some spaces now. Spaces are going to be a bit of a problem because it's obviously going to change depending on the resolution of the screen. So if I just put these spaces in place, obviously they're not lined up now, but if I go into a new campaign and then resize, they are moving incorrectly. But annoyingly, the people on the characters on the sides overlap, kind of in a grid sense. So, not quite sure how to get that to work correctly. I think maybe they're dropped to the bottom. Maybe we need overlay. Because an overlay is just going to put everything off anyway. Where I wanted them. So for this, that's the main vertical box. That's the red one. So it needs to start with a horizontal box and then have a vertical box. All of that needs to be in. Okay, so we can get it to look like that. That's not going to be too bad as a start. Need a vertical box. put that actually? Not there. Just trying to get the little images lined up. So there's the vertical box, holds all the text. There we go. So many hierarchy in containers, it's quite difficult to figure out where everything goes. I don't know why I've got a bit of a random space there. I won't worry about that. That should all be in there, I think. Yeah, done that wrong. Horizontal box, then the vertical box, then the image. There we go. Got him in the end. Yeah, so I figured actually that one could have been, I could have just changed that one, couldn't I? Looking at it now, I see how I've done that the long way. Yellow's actually done right. So the red, we have horizontal, horizontal, there's just too many layers in there. Okay. See how that looks. Oh, great. Didn't realise it was so far away. So the main vertical box definitely wants to go across the page. I want the text to be aligned. Don't want it to be bolded. So yeah, it's kind of at this level. Immediately after the text, we want our 4 players in there. But we also want them in a vertical box. And we've done that, so now we can have spaces before and after, which will center everything in the way that we want it centered. So a bit messy on the green. Seem to have got the text a bit confused. Just copy this text now into here. Okay, so that should look fairly good. Obviously our screen width is bigger. Our character icons are not quite so cool. Yellow one is upside down. But the basics of it is there. Now we just need to be able to click on them. So it's actually at the horizontal box level really where the click should be done, I think. Let's have a look. Actually that's not true. In the original you actually have to click on the face. Only the face is clickable. I guess that prevents people from making mistakes, but what I'll do is have image clickable. This button down. I think actually it would create different functions for those in the case where I've named it before I've so we'll just delete them all for all the functions and rebind them and we get consistent names. We'll tie up the handled event to each of them. So kind of like before, the easiest way to deal with it would be to have an custom event here, which will be on selected character, which takes the name of the character they've selected, and then for each of these just to call that. And we are actually going to transition now to a completely different level. Let's make sure we get the right one. That's the one we wanted. I think we were going to switch to a different level. I have to think about that one actually. Effectively, we need to go to the island selection page, but it's not really a UI anymore, it's more of an actual level, I think, for what we want. So I think it will be a different level. Just won't be the island selection. That we have, so because we're transitioning, the only way to make sure we keep that information is to put it on the game instance. So put it on the game instance, and then we can transition over. So what we're going to do is jump over here. It's called skirmish setup. So what we'll do instead is create a new level. So the island select will have the effectively the UI on the right hand side. Well, actually one thing that we did miss from the menu. We can sneak in here. There's some options. It's not going to fit now. We're on the wrong level. So we need to just shrink down the font size of each of those. Let's go a little bit lower. Add that one in next time. So the island select is effectively going to look like the island select within this case, but we just probably won't have the options button because all of that's related to kind of general options. Restarting the game, we'll handle by the main menu. Load saves handled by the main menu, and the other options will be handled by the options page anyway. So we'll have everything that we've got here, just no options. That includes the play island part, the sunset, the players at the top. So yeah, that would be the next part. I think I'm gonna stop now for the day, and hopefully pick that up tomorrow. But just trying to make the kind of core menu and entry points to the game a bit clearer, because what we were doing for the skirmish is really just going to be kind of used within the main menu, and I think got caught up on some varying details of that I need to decide upon and maybe do a little bit differently, particularly with the kind of the single player versus the multiplayer thing, whether that should be the same screen, and if it is the same screen, how to handle a more flexible range of players and colours. Yeah, so continue on hopefully tomorrow. Thanks for watching, and that's all for now. Bye for now.